Hello, everyone. This is Soren, Black Belt Mindset, and quite fortunate to have Joel White with us today as our guest. And Joel runs a number of different areas of health and well-being with men. But I'm going to give Joel a good opportunity to introduce himself and his background. I've got a number of questions to ask him. So, Joel, welcome, and just tell us a bit about yourself.
I really appreciate that, Raj. It's great to be here, given this opportunity. Where to start? Well, what would you like me to start with and tell you a bit about myself?
Yeah, I mean, you're involved with the men's well-being and health space, and in terms of your business.
Yeah, I guess to sort of start, they're going to go backwards. Rewired For Men is in its current form, as it were, since December last year, January this year. What it's predominantly focused around, Raj, is empowering male entrepreneurs, men in business, to rewire their unconscious beliefs that usually hold them back. These are around money, work, and relationships. When I work with these men, I empower them to rewire their unconscious beliefs permanently without the need of the emotional story, because it's not important, in 30 days or less. I'll unpack some of that as we go along in regards to that. What led me to Rewire For Men, Raj, is really, for me, I've worked in the health and wellbeing space for about 10 to 12 years. Through my own journey through mental health concerns, I became very acutely aware that there's a lack of services out there to support men's mental health. And what isn't enough. And a lot of this shows really clearly in regards to, only 34% of men access talking therapy services. And usually what comes back is that they find it hard to relate to the person that they're speaking with, or it's just not set up for them in regards to how men look at life in regards to knowledge and reason, making decisions, reflection. And so, that obviously led in clearly, unfortunately, the landscape what we have where, predominantly men aged 30 and above 3.5 times more likely to take their own life. General male entrepreneurs generally have experienced some form of mental health concern up to about 39% and over. It really says it all around risk and self-harm. Things like that, really. So, it was really on my heart from my own experience and that of the men I've worked with to do something different for men, really. And over that sort of 10 to 12 years, the journey has been keeping it back in my mind and building up my therapeutic toolkit, as it were, to arrive where we are now in being focused to predominantly working with men. In regards to my own journey, which sort of started that, I was, I guess, in a previous life, a qualified teacher, was teaching IT, and I was teaching abroad at the time. And again, I'll unpack a bit of this more later. And I went through mental health concern, nervous breakdown, whatever phrase you want to give it. That's what brought me back to the UK, Raj. And when I reached out for help through the NHS, unfortunately, it was sadly lacking based on where they were at the time. I wasn't in a position to necessarily afford private healthcare. So that journey started with, well, the only person who can help me is me. And that led me down the journey into mental health and wellbeing, becoming a NLP master practitioner. And then obviously the journey continued from there, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I totally agree. Men taking their own lives is on the uprise these days, and the work you're doing is fabulous. If we can save one life, it makes a real difference. You've had lived experience as well. So you said you had mental health challenges and as well burnout. So tell me a bit more about that and how you sort of recovered from that.
Yeah, so for me, during that incident, like I said, I guess when that journey started, when I went to look back over my life, a lot of those difficulties living with what I'm going to call it started for me when I was younger. And I now realize to me and other men, your unconscious beliefs that we all carry really do influence how we show up in the world, how we behave, how we make decisions. And for me, looking back and other men that I've worked with and women, it's usually around 5 to 7 years old, those start to get formed. When things happen around us, we do our best to make sense of the world. It can be really difficult for young children to do that, because if you imagine their experience of the world is probably the size of a flyer, whereas for adults, we have a bookcase, because obviously all the things we've been through. So it can be very, very difficult. And unfortunately, what can happen for a young child is the strong but wrong response happens, where they hold themselves responsible for what's going on around them. So they'll pick up unconscious beliefs, and this is what I do as well, around, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve success, I'm not going to be popular, whatever it might be. And the interesting thing about beliefs is there is no evidence to them, but we hold them dearly to heart. So I think for me, a lot of that influenced a lot of my life going forwards in how I looked at things. In essence, it was almost like living in a cage, and I'll unpack more of this later. That although the cage might have got a little bit bigger, I was still in that cage, struggling with low self-confidence, low self-esteem, keeping the peace. Didn't want to upset other people in regards to what would you then think of me, etc., etc. So I realised, as life went on, that was kind of what was coming up for me. Wasn't really indecision's a big part of that when you're in the cage. So I kind of got by with making decisions, and was quite fortunate to some degree. Where it ended up for me was, again, recognising usually around the age of 13, that was for me, trying to fit in, be popular, think about the options, don't even know what I want to do when I grow up. I was being bullied as well, outside the home, outside the home environment, not in school. Just a lot to deal with at 13 years old, not really knowing who to speak to. And again, things progressed, things broke down in the marriage between my mum and my dad. That was kind of always, the writing was on the wall, regardless of that. I was dealing with all this, with this sense of unknownness, indecisiveness, having a lack of confidence, self-esteem. That really suddenly brought me again, another point really, 21 years old, come out of university, big wide world, what am I going to do? Supposed to be a man, no idea, what career I was going to do. Did well at university, but wasn't really sure at all. I almost found myself stumbling into the health and wellbeing field there, really, and working with young people. Working in a school as a learning mentor, an opportunity came up to become a qualified teacher. Never wanted to be a teacher, Raj. Mum was a teacher at some point. My dad was a teacher at some point. And that's sort of where that journey took me into that.
Yes.
And again, what kind of seemed a great thing, what men do, including myself, when things were kind of getting uneven at home between my sister and my mum, at this point, we obviously left my dad and moved on. I thought, what a great way it would be to deal with these situations is move to another country and things will be okay and they'll sort themselves out. And what I really realised, there was a lot of avoidance in that, and as men, we do that. What seems rational at the time is very irrational when your emotions are all over the show. So, for me, I moved from that cage of insecurity and difficulties to being on a running machine, really, if I can put it right, just constantly striving to be better, trying to prove myself. I'll be successful when, and so on and so forth. So it was okay when I was in Thailand for the first 2 years. Someday I was partying very hard, is the only way I can put it. A lot of hedonism in there, but working really, really hard. And I think for me that tide changed further when I went to when I went to China.
Yes.
When I was in China, Raj, I was the head of department of IT in a college, international college. So teaching A-level, managing 2 members of staff, 3 technicians. Then I became network manager, so I was looking at the provision of IT in the college. Then I became head of house, which is like a pastoral role, looking after quite a significant number of children, young people, should I say, because I was 16 to 19. Then I decided to do a master's degree. Then I decided to get involved in general pastoral stuff in the college, and obviously still partying very, very hard. So you can sort of see how that's building up, Raj, to imagine on that running machine and basically falling off it. And unfortunately, there's workplace bullying in there for about 12 months. So it really taken its toll. I was fortunate to get a new job in South Korea, a school, which is a true international school. And it was just too much, Raj, because of the nature of the school and where my mental health was at. I kind of aware things were going wrong. I didn't fully understand why, really. And it was only that a full-on, beyond burnout, full-on nervous breakdown is the way I can put it, when I was in the school, in a classroom, having a meeting with the assistant head, that everything's really, really fell apart. And that's just something what brought me back to the UK. Was living with my mum in her premises, one bed flat for about 6 to 8 months. Wasn't fit for work. And like I said, it was during that time where it was very dark, Raj. You know, there was an attempt in there and taking my own life. Things started getting worse. It was really, I guess, that point where I was fortunate. Some men don't get it, Raj. That's that bottom of the barrel, the sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, and for me, I was fortunate enough to have that moment. And that's when I made that decision, when I looked around for support from the NHS, it wasn't going to happen. That the only person who could change that is me, really. And I guess that's where the resolve started, Raj, was at that point.
Well, thank you for your candor and honesty and sharing your dark times. You know, you were on this treadmill machine, running for success, getting promoted on a regular basis. Then at the same time, your coping strategies were probably partying.
Yes.
Which over time it ended in this situation where you left that job and took time out to try and rebuild your life again. So we appreciate you sharing that level of detail.
Yeah.
Well, when you're in that situation and you're facing other men in that situation, what can you do and I do to help them?
I think generally what I find with men, so I've worked with quite numerous men over the years, during that 10 to 12 years, working in third sector, NHS contracts, whatever, and general social prescribing counselling. That for me, I guess the first point really is just, just be there really for a man to kind of say, it sounds really difficult. It must be hard what you're going through. I've got no idea what it's like to go through that, because I've never experienced it in my life and I never will, because I'm not you. And just give them the space, because lots of men, they hide. We hide behind an emotional mask, where all these stereotypes that we should and shouldn't do. Man up, be strong, push the emotions away, blah blah blah, and that, it's all nonsense. It's not helpful at all. So it's very difficult, even for a man, potentially take that risk to ask for help. And it's really important just to kind of be there. A man wants to be heard. And 9 out of 10 times, most of the time, they can find their own solutions within themselves. So it's really important to hold that space. But more importantly, not just jumping straight away, going, oh, do this, do that, do the other, because that's not helpful either, really.
Yeah, because men are problem solvers, not they?
Yeah,
we try to solve problems, but we need to listen as well.
Absolutely, and men are great at solving problems, because how we approach the world is very much through decision making, reflection, logic, and reason. And if we are emotionally grounded, we do very well at it. Unfortunately, when we're not, things go out the window, and it becomes very difficult to do anything correctly. Indecisiveness, making poor decisions, sometimes through sexual desire, has a major impact on a lot of men, but also from a state of anger or whatever. All these can really impact on our ability to make healthy, wholesome decisions, from that degree. So, it can be useful doing that, but also, practical tips are really useful for men. If they've spoken, they've worked through things, just planting the seed, really. Have you thought about reading this book? Have you looked at going to that men's group? Perhaps, have you ever looked into accessing, one-to-one support? Whatever it is, just really simple things. But I think the biggest thing of all around, again, you'll be able to relate to that. I say practicing what you preach. When you say you do this and these are what your values are, do you actually do that on a day-to-day basis? Are you able to be vulnerable? Are you able to be open? Are you able to be there to listen?
Yes.
All these things are really important.
Indeed, yes. Trying to be role models in that environment and lived experience is important. You and I sharing our stories and our journeys. Men sometimes don't know how to handle emotions. No. We're not taught at it at school. Anger, stress, all these other issues. We're competing in an environment where money it's become the end goal, but it's not, is it? It shouldn't be.
Absolutely not, Raj. You know what I mean? It's always an interesting question that I asked at talk recently, where I got people in the room, put the hand up and go, put your hand up if you're male or female, put your hand up if you're in business, or keep it up. The majority of the room obviously got the hands up. And keep your hand up if you are successful. And it was just really interesting seeing the hesitation through the audience, but more so with men. You know what I mean? And because we have this warped idea that, particularly for men, success is a BMW on the drive, 6-bedroom house, 100 and odd K in your bank account, whatever it is. And if we don't get that, then we're failing. We're a failure.
Yeah.
And it's ludicrous because they're all external measures where in some circumstances we don't even have control over those outcomes, those situations, really. And that's when things go wrong, if we think we're not successful enough or a real man, or whatever it is, really. So, it's important to recognise beyond that, and then that goes back into what I mean, talking about these unconscious beliefs of recognizing what's going on, what's going on under the surface. Why am I looking at the world that way? What is influencing the decisions I make in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, social media and magazines, TV, everything else shows that to be happy, you need to have these big cars, these fancy holidays, nice clothes, all these different things. So the yardstick for measuring success is out there, and people are trying to compare themselves to it. But how much do we think about quality of life? Spending time with family. You're appreciating our health and having a different yardstick. And friendship, companionship as a form of success, because we're in the social media world. We think we got 10,000 friends, but we haven't. We're still lonely. We're sitting in our houses in remotely conversations.
Yeah. And very much what you hit on there is what I mentioned about before, that usually, I guess, the telltale signs of things to look out for in regards to if a man who's struggling is, based on how they show up or don't show up in 3 areas of their life, which is money, work, and relationships. And what I mean by that around money is usually if a man is struggling with his unconscious beliefs, his emotions, whatever it is, they will make poor decisions around money. So they may make decisions, take massive risk around investing on the stock market or a business decision, or to make themselves feel better, they go and buy a new car or a new Rolex watch, or in an effort to make themselves feel better from that degree. Even though they can't, in brackets, necessarily afford it, they'll go and make ridiculous decisions. Very classic telltale signs of where a man is at based on that situation around money. Around work, Raj, how that shows up for a man when they're being influenced too much by their unhealthy, unconscious beliefs. They will undervalue themselves. So they will charge less for their services. They will discount heavily because they get desperation comes through to secure that deal, whatever it might be. Or they feel they've got to work, 120-hour weeks or 80-hour weeks or whatever it is, because they've got to be successful. And as we know, I get it. Some weeks we may work 40-hour weeks or 50-hour weeks, but it comes quite a concern if it's a regular pattern every week of being 60 hours or more. That's extremely unhealthy and for anybody, regardless of who you are or what you are, what role you do. And obviously the other one you've kind of touched upon there is around relationships. How when a man is struggling with unconscious beliefs or emotional regulation, whatever, however you want to call it, they may not go out as much, building non-friendships and deep connections. They may isolate themselves from those interactions. If they are a dad or a husband, they might be physically there with the children, but mentally they're somewhere else, and it's quite
Yes.
obvious. They're thinking about, their heads in their inbox, as it were, thinking about those emails or the project tomorrow or whatever it is. So when it's really impacted across those 3 areas of your life, Raj, it really is having a massive impact on your overall general health and well-being, but that of your nearest and dearest around you, whether that's your mum, your dad, your brothers and sisters, your wife, your children, husband, whatever, it's irrelevant. All those things will be heavily impacted by literally unconscious beliefs that are playing in the background.
Yeah, these unconscious beliefs are there for a long time. You don't realize how it's dominating our decisions and our daily interaction. So you're doing a lot of work with men at the moment. You run a session every 2 weeks, behind the mask session, and I do a men's Let's Talk, Don't Suffer in Silence. So tell me a bit about what you do.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've realized throughout my journey is a great way to help men is one-to-one, because obviously what I do with Rewired For Men, I bring the awareness in around their unconscious beliefs. I empower them to actually change them at the root cause. I work a lot with developing awareness through psychoeducation. We've got lots of great resources that we can access, and that's fantastic, and that helps a lot. But also what's really useful for many is to be part of a community or a safe space, or whatever you want to call it. And community is really important for men, to be part of something, particularly with other men. That's what we used to do in the olden days. That's what other cultures do. They get together around the fireplace, around the fire, and they talk and they problem solve together. And it's a great way for men to manage. It's the age-old problem shared is a problem halved in regards to that. And over the years, I have done men's groups. They've been very powerful and very beneficial. I still do one now. So for me, one of the things I created was something called Rewired For Men, which is now known as Behind the Mask. And what I mean by behind the mask, Raj, is what I talked about before, is a lot of time we wear these emotional masks on the outside to kind of hide what goes on the inside. So Rewired For Men Behind the Mask gives the opportunity for men to show up as they are, and be able to be vulnerable and share some things about themselves behind the emotional mask that they wear. And for me, Rewired For Men Behind the Mask, I do it on a regular basis. It's done monthly, every second Tuesday of the month, 7:30 to 8:30. To find out more information, it is on the website in regards to that. But generally, what's important to point out is I don't record the session, Raj, and the reason why I don't is it helps to encourage the idea of a safe space where men can just turn up and be listened to, be heard, and problem solve together. I think is more than anything else is really important.
Yeah, I very much agree. And not to record those sessions, we do the same in Men Let's Talk, Don't Suffer in Silence, to give that ability to encourage safe, talking, sharing in a safe environment. Brilliant. So how do you keep yourself busy outside that? How do you relax? Any particular hobbies that you do?
Yeah, so for me, Raj, going back to what I say about practice what you preach, sort of on a general sort of weekly basis, I play football, I go and do yoga, I have regular Reiki sessions, reflexology, I like salsa dancing, so I try and go and do a bit of salsa dancing, and a little bit of running. I think it's important, like I said, to look at all aspects of what makes me me. I do feel it's important for everybody to do something that brings in a sense of physical exercise, mental, emotional, and spiritual. They're all elements of who we are as individuals. And, they really help me do what I do. So when I do my work through Rewired For Men, from whatever aspect, I can actually show up and be there, be present.
That's a really good thing, because we can't give ourselves fully unless we're both physically and mentally tough and strong. And we do this by exercise, like you're doing for football. I do martial arts, jiu-jitsu, aikido, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and relaxation. You're doing this salsa dancing as well, Reiki and mindfulness sessions. So this is all positive stuff that we try and encourage. But it's quite alien to some men. They're into football, but they're not used to maybe other physical activity. Sorry, other like self-help, like Reiki and mindfulness. So what can we do to encourage them to try things like that?
I think for me, Raj, it's normalizing it. Normalizing that it's okay to look at these things. Part of what I do is I'm very good at finding a bit of information that's accessible for them to have a look into these things from that degree. And very much like anything else, a lot of men, because of logic and reason, they want to know what are the benefits of doing something more so than anything else. And it's being clear about what benefits those can bring, to individuals. And obviously, like anything else, there's lots of podcasts out there now which men have done, which talk about these alternative ways of looking after your well-being more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that we're trying to encourage men to try a variety of different things, whether it's yoga, some form of exercise, even just walking alone, out doing that. They say that 80 to 90% of depression can be sorted out by physical exercise. There's talk about these, when the muscles start acting and putting them under work, it creates a chemical that helps reduce stresses in your life, and they're still doing research in that area. So I very much agree with what you're saying. But physical exercise is very important. Doing different variety of exercises, yoga or Reiki or something that you can at least try out and decide.
Yeah, the last thing I want to say about what you talked about there, if anything which is really good for men to look at, which is practical, is something called the 5 ways to well-being concepts. If you just Google the 5 ways to well-being, it was an approach which came into existence about the early 2000s by I think he was a sociologist. It talks literally about the simplicity of how to look after your well-being on a day-to-day basis. And it's the whole idea of, whatever is familiar with, if you eat your 5 fruit and veg a day, it's going to help with your diet, you're going to be healthier, blah, blah, blah. So 5 ways to well-being is around your mental health and well-being, that either people are either already doing these things or just need to do a bit more. So, very quickly with them, one of them is connect. We've talked about the importance of connection, what it is to speak with other people, develop relationships. You've got keep active. We mentioned that about exercise, what we've just been talking about now. You've got take notice. What's going on in your head, what's going on in the environment around you, what do you see? Even within the room you're sat in or outside, if you go walking somewhere, keep learning. It's important to keep learning, keep those brain cells active. Whether that's going on a course or reading a book or reading a leaflet or going to a museum, doesn't particularly matter, doing Sudoku. All these things will help around learning. The last one is give, Raj. So that could be, volunteering. It could be ringing somebody up. It could give them somebody to smile. Do you know what I mean? 5 ways to well-being is a great way as a practical thing for a man to engage in and put into their life, which can help them become a bit more familiar with trying new things like Reiki or reflexology or meditation or whatever it might be.
So tell me about Global Man. I understand you're part of that group as well.
Global Man, obviously, as you know, Roger, people might not who listen to this. I do come to the group that you do. I think it's really, really beneficial. And obviously, off the back of that, became aware of Ian Spears. And Ian Spears is one of the co-directors here with his partner, Morella. And what he's in the process of doing is growing something called Global Man. And it literally is the opportunity for fundamentally of men practicing what they preach, having similar values, life lived experience. And more importantly, building that problem solving around business, developing and supporting each other around business. And it's really, really important for me for that sort of thing to grow, particularly the idea of being global, to that movement, that community, that culture to grow globally. and it's really exciting, although it's quite new, to be part of that and have that opportunity.
Yes, indeed. So we've been to some Global Man meetings, and it's a great safe environment for business owners, entrepreneurs, and the ability to share your challenges and problem solve together, to hear people's history and stories, but more importantly, it's a collaboration of minds to make a difference for men's lives. And obviously, it's part of Global Women as a separate entity, and that energy and camaraderie within the two groups is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's really important as well to get across. Yes, but when they do these events, it's Global Man and Global Woman together. But there is time apart for men to do what men want to do, and realise that supportive network and problem solving, whether it's around personal or business or whatever. But then, like you said, Raj, it's the opportunity to come back together with the women of Global Women. And that can be really encouraging, it can be really motivating. It's great to share ideas, because men and women are not equal and never will be. We are completely different. But what's needed in society is the opportunity to respect each other where we're at, and to bring our abilities together where everyone benefits. We're very much Global Women and Global Man together, promote that ethos, that way of living.
Absolutely. Yeah, so do reach out to us or get in contact with the website about Global Man and Global Woman. Now, as we're last few minutes together, so what would you say is unique about what you do to helping individuals? You talked about the running machine, men being in a cage, and so tell me a bit more about that as a closing remark, really.
Yeah, so what I do basically gets the man out of the cage and off the running machine to become a real man, where they are emotionally regulated, they're less impacted by their own crap and of others around them. Once their unconscious beliefs are rewired, they don't come back. So they can be more creative, they can be more present in their life. And at the end of the day, from a business perspective, that leads to better decisions around money, work, and relationships. So they're going to be more productive, and at the end of the day, they're going to make more profit. In regards to what makes it different from all the other life coaches out there or whatever they're saying, I'm getting to the root cause, which is the unconscious beliefs that's in the background, and not only bringing awareness, but rewiring them permanently. Also in that process, Raj, I'm not bringing in the emotional story. Life coaching and business coaching and counselling, a lot of it is just bringing up the past and bringing out emotions that can be really unstabilizing, and trying to get your brain to, oh, well, we can just change that a bit. You can't. What's done is done. You know what I mean? Why make up old stories if all they're going to do is have a massive impact on you emotionally? And when a man when emotions come up, which can be quite overwhelming, they'll either get angry or they'll shut down. And it's not a great place to be if that's what you're finding around these sorts of approaches. Whereas Rewired For Men, I don't need the story. I don't need the emotional story to get down to the unconscious beliefs. So it really helps to reduce the impact of any emotional overwhelm that comes into that. And if anything, like counselling or life coaching, whatever, it could be weeks, it could be months until you see a change from a small step forwards. Whereas with Rewired For Men, in getting to the unconscious beliefs, rewiring them permanently, 30 days or less is where that difference comes from working with me. And it does what it does what it says on the tin. And the fact I'm empowering you with a very simple technique, you can make that as part of your daily life practice going forward.
How do people get hold of you on this website? What's your website address?
Yeah, so my website to find out more about what I do is www.rewiredformen.com. On my website, it tells you obviously about what I do. You can look at the online events that I do there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Raj. I'm very active on LinkedIn in regards to Rewired For Men. I'm more than happy having virtual coffee with people, just to chat so they can find out a bit more about me. And more importantly, how I can help them in regards to what they're maybe facing at this moment in time. I think it's really important to offer that opportunity from that degree.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Joel White, for Rewired For Men. making a real difference in men's lives out there. I appreciate your time and your knowledge and your insights and experience, and all the very success with the work you're doing. Take care.
Thank you, Raj. Appreciate it.